Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Tuesday, February 9th edition of ATS Radio. I'm your host, Adam Burke. I'll be joined today by Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline, a jack of all trades for us here on ATS Radio. We're going to recap our thoughts on the Super Bowl, talk some NHL, talk Pebble Beach for the PGA Tour, and the Daytona 500 coming up here on Sunday, the start of the NASCAR season. So we'll talk about all those things with Brian here in a neat and tidy 45-minute or so show. Over at ATS.io, I wrote up a preview for the Daytona 500 this morning. You can check that out. Last night, posted a preview for the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, which is actually just Pebble Beach Pro this year with no amateurs on hand. So you read about those over at the website. Not to mention daily college basketball, NBA, NHL picks and predictions. Lots of good stuff from a very strong cast of writers over there at ATS.io. Highly encourage you to check out the fine work being done over there and encourage you to download the ATS app, which you can find in the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. Full article integration from the website. You can track your bets. You can look at an updated legal U.S. sportsbooks odds screen with the lines for the games that night. It's a statistical database, so you can find some helpful handicapping information from that. And of course, you've got all kinds of helpful handicapping tools at your disposal, whether you have an Android or an iOS device. You can sign up for the premium model subscription, $9.99 a week, $19.99 a month. Lots of very good resourceful things in that ATS app. Download that today. You can head over to ATS.io on your mobile device, go to the ATS app page, then click the button to download, whether you have an Android or an iOS device, or you can just search for those in either the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. With that, we bring on today's guest. That is Mr. Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. And Brian, how's it going today, man?
All right, Adam, life after football, but we start looking ahead to next year and the quarterback carousel in the offseason, the draft, and hoops, hockey, golf, NASCAR, baseball's coming. We got sports. Weird at times, but we got sports.
Yes, sir. We definitely do. And speaking of baseball, I'm going through writing my 2021 MLB betting guide. Got about 8 first drafts written for the teams. There's transaction updates in there, offense and pitching previews, season win total pick on all 30 teams, plus all the future stuff, division, pennant, World Series, and some player future things. So working very hard on that MLB betting guide. That should be coming your way here the last week of February or maybe on March 1st. We'll see here. Of course, delays, not knowing when the season's going to start and all of that. But that MLB betting guide will be coming your way here in 3 weeks' time or so. But Brian, Super Bowl 55 in the books, not a very exciting game. A good game if you were a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan or better. If you bet a lot of unders on the props, you did pretty well. But other than that, just not a lot of action except for, Patrick Mahomes running for his life all night.
Well, the quarterbacks went under. That's obviously a good result for the books, but the skill guys racked up some stuff. And we said that in many instances, guys that go over the total from a skill position perspective are on the losing side. Kelsey flew over. They got Hill going late in the game. The Chiefs rushing the ball was good. We had talked about that as a team. It's amazing. There's some cool things in there. And the drama when you're watching a game, the one prop, I had Ronald Jones to score a touchdown and the Bucs to convert a 4th down. And so you get the 4th and 1 play right at the beginning of the game, and that's 2 for 1 right there. And sure enough, the Chiefs with a great goal line stand, and that denied that one. So the props were fun and exciting. The under was the way to go, and the Tampa Bay defense was sensational. There's no getting around it. They to see Mahomes rattled basically for the first time that I can remember, and they had him running backwards all game long. I mean, he wasn't running side to side. He was running backwards 15 yards, then going to the side, and basically the Chiefs, the Bucs did to the Chiefs what the Chiefs did to the Bills. The difference was, you're looking at what they have, 11 penalties for 120 yards. And the Chiefs were doing the same thing to the Bills. And in this game, they were calling the holding and the pass interferences. And you were going, how after all the whole year, how were the Bills not open at all against the Chiefs? Well, they were doing what they did to the Bucs. The difference was this crew called it in the first game. They didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty similar in the Browns game, too, where the Chiefs were doing a lot of clutching and grabbing and getting away with it. And, it's a great strategy as long as you're getting away with it. And then when you're not, obviously we kind of saw a flag fest there for a decent part of Super Bowl 55. Patrick Mahomes, according to Next Gen Stats, the NFL advanced statistics product, scrambled for 497 yards in the Super Bowl. That's how much pressure he was under in that game. Obviously had some runs of his own and all of that with collapsed pockets. But, I mean, the dude was just running backwards and making these absurd throws. Like, guys were dropping balls. Guys were getting hit in the face by some of his passes. Like, I know the stat line doesn't show it, 26 of 49 for 270 or whatever it was. That kid played a hell of a game under the circumstances. I mean, some of those throws were just absolutely absurd and did so with turf toe. As we talked about on the show the last few weeks, he's actually having surgery for that here this week. But, I mean, look, the thing that I was kind of talking about, had my dad over for the Super Bowl, and we were kind of discussing this on yesterday's show a little bit too. Who the hell beats Kansas City next year and keeps them from the Super Bowl? It's a very short list. Buffalo, maybe Cleveland if they fix the defense. Other than that, I don't know.
Well, what I'd be curious to see, and then believe me, there'll be games when teams try this and they get absolutely shredded. But, the NFL's a copycat league. I mean, if you remember the Wildcat, when Miami ran the Wildcat, and for 5 weeks they dominated their games, and GM or the defensive coordinators got game tape, and that was the end of that. And I'm wondering if the Bucs didn't give the league a blueprint to level the playing field with these guys. Now, the Chiefs didn't make hardly any adjustments in that game, but it's only one game, and you're not, Hill and Kelsey, they're all terrific, and Mahomes is phenomenal. And I'm not saying they fall off the map, but it's not going to shock me if, anytime anybody's getting ready to play the Chiefs, they're watching this game tape and, wonder if there aren't more games where the Chiefs struggle because a blueprint's been given to slow them down.
In fairness to Kansas City, and this is something that clearly we didn't talk about enough over the 2 weeks prior to the Super Bowl, and clearly something I didn't think about enough in the lead up to this game. I mean, that offensive line had no chance. They were down both tackles.
Fisher was out.
Right.
Yeah.
They had to shuffle some guys around. They had 7th round picks and undrafted free agents and all those kinds of things on the line. I mean, look, that was like the offensive line Deshaun Watson plays with every week in the Super Bowl. And Mahomes, to his credit, was only sacked 3 times in that game. But, that's what it was really to me, is that, Tampa Bay isolated the areas that they could pressure Mahomes with that offensive line. And now I think when you look at this from a Kansas City standpoint, they're going to improve their depth on the offensive line in the offseason if, that opportunity presents itself. So I do wonder if it's just one of those things where it was a perfect storm where we didn't really factor in the offensive line to a high enough degree, but the Buccaneers obviously did in their game plan and, were able to have great success getting Mahomes running for his life throughout that game. That's the thing, is that, that Chiefs offensive line that they got away with most of the year, they couldn't do it in the Super Bowl. And now you wonder, how they address that area of concern. And if they do that, then, I really don't know how you beat this team.
Well, I mean, they did, like I said, they did a lot of the stuff that happened in that game was self-inflicted. You line up offside on a field goal. That's a 4-point play. I mean, hey, they stopped them on 4th and goal at the 1-foot line, or this is an even bigger boat race. And honestly, the game was pretty much decided before halftime, and I'm not saying it was arrogance, and I understand them calling timeouts to try to get the ball back, but once it became 3rd and 2, the Chiefs should have let the clock run. And, okay, maybe New England gets a field goal, or New England, I mean, maybe Tampa Bay gets a field goal, or you stop them on 3rd and 2, and then you're likely only going to get a field goal. They were trying to get it back to get a touchdown, knowing they get the ball back in the 3rd quarter, too. So they were going for the home run right there. But once it became 3rd and 2, a real manageable 3rd down situation, the Chiefs should have let the clock run down. And so that cost him a touchdown before halftime. And that made the hill just too big to climb. So there was a degree of, it's just not being smart and undisciplined. They were very undisciplined. Offside on the field goal. Mateau was a lunatic. But there was also an element of arrogance there that I think really hurt them before halftime.
Yeah, Andy Reid got out-coached. I know the offensive line wasn't very good, but Andy Reid got out-coached. I thought the timeout usage was just asinine in that spot as well. That was just not the right thing to do there. Go ahead and let it run to halftime. Make your adjustments, and there weren't even many of those made by the Chiefs, during the extended halftime intermission break. So, hey, we move on, and we'll see. I mean, kudos to Tom Brady. 7 Super Bowls, 5 MVPs, but the one big takeaway for me is Tom Brady was fine, didn't make any mistakes, but Devin White should have won the MVP, or maybe even Shaq Barrett should have won the MVP. You held Kansas City to 9 points. I mean, that Super Bowl win is on the defense, but Brady won it, and it just speaks to, again, how you need something really crazy to happen for a quarterback not to win the Super Bowl MVP. And again, it's something that we have to factor into the equation as we go forward here, that if there's any feasible chance of giving the MVP to a quarterback, it will happen.
Well, clearly Gronkowski, those are 2 huge plays. He was a factor in the game. You could have made a case for Fournette as well, but I completely agree with you. The problem was, and you mentioned the 2 guys. It's happened before. In this instance, co-MVPs of Barrett and White would have been fine by me. It'd be hard to pick the whole defense. They can't do that. But could have gone the co-MVP route, I think, on the defensive side of the ball.
All right, so we transition over to the NHL side of things here on today's show, and a 3rd game postponed for tonight now. Philadelphia and Washington off the board. Philadelphia with COVID issues. So, here we go again, where we've got another team that's going to be missing some games, and this one here in the East Division. So we've already had interruptions with the Devils. Now we get one with the Flyers as well. So, another game off the board tonight, along with St. Louis, Minnesota, and Arizona, Colorado. So I know this is something we were talking about a little bit last week on my show, something I know you talked about quite a bit on your show, where, there have been several teams now afflicted with COVID to the point where, sort of fitting in all of these games into the schedule window that the NHL has is just becoming increasingly difficult for them with the number of cancellations. And, again, it's obviously very tough for these teams to stay in a rhythm, to stay crisp when they keep getting, really every COVID interruption cancels 2 games between the same 2 teams, plus something after that for one of the teams. So, it's very tough for these teams to get in rhythm. You've got some teams that have played 14 games, some that have played 9. It's just kind of all over the place right now.
Well, I've been saying this now for a while, and the New Jersey Buffalo thing is the thing that set this thing ablaze. And, who knows what the right answers are, but this league is having way more trouble dealing with this thing than anybody else. And I think the season's in peril. I really do, because the Sabres are now 2 more games canceled. The Devils had 17 guys who gave it to the Sabres, and now it's a runaway freight train with them. And then the teams that are infected are now impacting teams that are sitting there waiting to play them, and then the teams that are sitting there waiting to play them, their day may be coming down the road. And if you're sitting there with his 8 to 10 games you got to be making up at the end of the year, and you're going to go to the percentage point crap, the season has lost all integrity, because the playing field's not fair already, with some divisions being stronger than others. But then you're going to get teams, a team like Minnesota, their last 8 games, they got to play St. Louis 4 times and Vegas twice in their last 8 games. If they say, well, okay, you can't make up your, 6 or 7 of those games, but those games for Minnesota were against Anaheim or LA or San Jose. Those were winnable games that could have got them in the playoffs. It's not a fair playing field. Percentage points, some team in the division had played really tough teams, and the games that were semi-winnable for them that could have been the difference between getting in the playoffs to not, if those aren't made up and they go to percentage points, I'm telling you, the asterisk will be the biggest asterisk in the history of sports.
Yeah, and I mean, this seems like it's an environmental thing in the sense that, the playing conditions are sort of why this is happening, at least according to, some of the protocols that have been adjusted where they took out the glass behind the benches.
Useless.
They're kind of talking about how, it's sort of played in a cooler, drier environment. So they're sort of talking about, how maybe that's kind of spreading it a little bit more, whatever the case may be. Like you said, I don't know how much longer they can continue with this, where it's 2 or 3 teams a week, where you're canceling 4 games.
It's got to be rapid testing. It costs. You have rapid testing, but the problem is, if a guy's testing negative for it, you don't know anything about this damn thing. Guy's testing negative for it, but it's in his system. It just didn't click on that it's quote unquote active. Let's take the glass out behind the coaches. What the hell? It's a nice idea. You're putting lipstick on a pig. The problem is if one guy's sitting on a bench and they're sitting there on the bench, sliding back and forth on a bench, huffing and puffing as hard as they can breathe, if one guy's got it, he's giving it to 6 guys on the bench. And you can't spread the bench out, and separate them on the bench because the games would take 10 hours to play because there'd be so many offsides with guys on the long change coming off an elongated bench. It's a nightmare.
It is.
This is not a bubble. They're traveling. The NFL got through it. They travel 8 times. One night in a hotel, played a game, get the hell out of Dodge. These guys are on the road 60 nights now.
Right. No, it definitely makes sense. And I guess, aside from the COVID things, and we'll keep betting this as long as it's out there. We'll still keep looking for opportunities and
enjoy the games
and all of that. As we've talked about, we kind of been following this and updating it week by week. Home teams were off to just an exceptional start in the NHL. I believe it was 61% last week. It's down to 59.2% for home teams winning outright. So it is kind of gradually regressing to the mean here a little bit. Overs are 92, 83, and 4 on the season here, according to the killersports.com database. So, we saw some very low-scoring games last night. We saw some high-scoring games on Sunday. Just kind of, ebbs and flows as far as the totals go.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about on this show, things that have worked forever, it's not a black and white thing. Here, just a quick sample. Okay, here's a weird one. You got Calgary is playing their 4th straight game against Winnipeg. I'm sorry, 4 of the last 5. And they're going at it again tonight. But when these new series starts, they're higher scoring. They go the first game, they kind of go for it. And then the second game, the team that loses has a sense of urgency and tightens things up. So, I mean, here, Calgary, the first time they played Winnipeg, scores 4-3. The rematch game the day later was 3-2. An over, then an under. It seems to be a general thing that has teeth to it. It's not across the board, but generally speaking, those are the kind of little things that have worked in the past that work in playoff series, and these are mini playoff series.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, like you said, the first game, especially if you're playing one of those little series, you're trying to kind of set a tone a little bit to a degree, and then things do tighten up. You get more familiarity, you make your adjustments, all that kind of thing. I think it's a really good angle to take a look at there. And again, the same things as always, first game back after a long trip, first game of a road trip, stuff like that. One other thing I want to take a look at here is that the sample sizes remain small. I will say that, but we've got 7 teams here with a power play percentage north of 30%. Washington's at 37, Dallas just below 37, Toronto 36.5, Chicago 36.5, Florida 34.5, Boston, they've scored on a third of their power play chances, and then Buffalo around 31%. So look for things like that too, where, those are teams that, have some good offensive players, certainly, but you don't see teams score on 30% of their power plays.
No, you can't.
That will come down.
It's unsustainable.
So those are things I think you can look at too, just sort of regression to the mean things.
Well, and the other thing, sometimes it's as simple as, a desperation. And you look at the standings and, who desperately needs the game? And now we're getting teams that have been off, and they got all kinds of games in hand and squirrely things like that. But the Islanders and the Rangers played last night, and the Islanders won 2-0. I mean, this is the playing field you're dealing with in the East. The Islanders were in the basement last night. They win the game, they jump all the way to fourth. Now, the Rangers lose the game. They're tied at the bottom with Jersey and Buffalo, who've been shelved. But the Rangers are in a bad spot. I mean, there's a defined sense of urgency for a team like the Rangers. They play the Bruins tomorrow night. There's only 2 games on the docket. I mean, Boston's on cruise control. The Rangers are desperate. I mean, they kind of need this game. So, I would look at a team like the Rangers on Wednesday night. Situationally, you look at the standings, because you cannot afford a 2, 3, 4 game losing streak because your season's over.
And you sort of wonder about that too. Like a team like Ottawa, for example, they're 2-10-1. I mean, they're already out of it. They were probably going to be anyway. They're building towards next season and the subsequent seasons after that. But you sort of wonder with a team like that, look, they have 5 points. And the North Division, being in Canada, I mean, they really haven't had the COVID issues that some of these U.S. teams have had to this point. Ottawa's 6 points behind Calgary, who's got 2 games in hand. Vancouver has lost 5 in a row. They don't look very good this season. But Ottawa is a team that I think this division continues to beat up on them because, those 2 points, you can't take them for granted anymore. You absolutely have to have them. Detroit, already in the basement, bad team. We knew that. There's a heightened sense of urgency to beat Detroit, to get those 2 points. So I think that's something that we could probably look at as we go forward here too. The Kings, bad team. They've lost 4 in a row. These bottom feeding teams, I think will just continue to get their brains beaten in for as long as this season goes, because those 2 points, you can't just walk in there and say, well, we're going to get them. You absolutely have to get them. So I think big favorites will keep playing, a pretty good return on investment here as we go forward.
Well, it's like a golf tournament. If the number one handicap hole and everybody's cutting through there, and the average score on the toughest hole in the course is a par 4. It's like 4.7 or something, and you go in there and you get a birdie on the toughest hole in the course, you gain 2 shots on the field, even though it looks like it's just a birdie. It's in the grand scheme of things. If you birdie that hole and everybody else is bogeying it, you gain 2 shots on the field, and it'll add up at the end of the day.
No, it absolutely will. One thing I was keeping an eye on here, Edmonton and Calgary played over the weekend. First game that they played head-to-head, kind of trying to keep track of, because I think it's the most heated rivalry in the NHL right now, trying to keep track of how Edmonton and Calgary do coming off of games against each other. Edmonton wins 3-1 over Ottawa last night. Ottawa, the worst team in the NHL right now. Edmonton plays Ottawa again tonight. Calgary, in their first game off of that Edmonton game, they host Winnipeg this evening. So that's an angle I'm kind of looking at here. Those games that have a little bit of extra emotional juice to them, is there a hangover factor? Is there a letdown factor?
There could be, but I sat down Saturday night. I couldn't wait for Edmonton, Calgary, and you would have thought it was Columbus playing Florida. There was nothing. You think they were going to go after each other and kill each other, and nothing. It was just a game. Believe me, it will happen at some point, but it's shocking. The first time they played this year in this new format, there was barely even pushing and shoving after the whistle. It was like, okay, fellas, what's the problem here?
Anything else you're looking at as far as the NHL, or are you ready to move on to the golf side of things?
Yeah, no, I think the things that have been working continue to work. They're just tried and true angles that always work, and now you've got this new format. And if I could, a little plug, do a thing with Cam Stewart, and we dive into a lot of this stuff. It's called the Hockey Betting Podcast. You get that on my Twitter feed at Brian Blessing, and we dive into a lot of this stuff. But hey, buddy, I've said, hockey is the best sport to bet. It's not even close. And I think we sing the praises of the odds makers, but I just don't get it sometimes, some of these numbers. The Islanders are coming off a 5-game losing streak, didn't get their games in because the Sabres were on the shelf. They had a whole week of practice, 5-game losing streak, and they're playing the game on Saturday, and they're minus a dime. They should have been minus $1.80, and it was life and death. They won the game. They won the game in overtime. But you're sitting there going, how are these guys not $1.50, $1.60? I mean, so I hate the value word, that, but that was a weird number. Tonight, I mean, Phillies at Washington.
That game got canceled.
Oh, I'm sorry. Philly, okay. But that number, really? Philly minus $1.20 on the road at Washington? What the hell is that? I mean, I'd have been playing Washington all day long. You're right, it got canceled. But, I mean, I look at some of these numbers, and I think, the big favorites are way overinflated. And I think in their games were the wrong team's favored, too. I mean, hey, thank you. Let's have at it.
I think that is a good point regarding practice. And I know you talked about that last week. You talked about, I believe, it with regards to St. Louis and the ability that they had to actually get a good practice or two in because, with this condensed schedule, I mean, you're not having, rigorous practices. I mean, maybe you're kind of having a morning skate or, a light practice on an off day while you're on the road, something like that. But I mean, you don't get the chance to fix things that are problematic. You could tell guys and write them on the board and talk about it in the room and talk about it in meeting rooms and all that, but you can't really fix things out there on the ice because you just don't have the luxury of practice time here. So that may be a pretty good angle to follow as we go forward.
Well, and I'll just throw one at you. And the irony of ironies, it's the game they lost, and of course it was the game I played. Arizona, the dates on this, played Anaheim on January 28th. They had 3 days off, which meant they were going to get a couple of practices in because once you start playing every other day, these guys can't practice. There's no, whatever. But they had 2 days to fully practice and work on stuff. And they go to St. Louis and said, they got all this extra practice and it's St. Louis's first game home. This is a really good spot for Arizona. Checks all the boxes. Well, Arizona threw the sink at him at the end of the game and lost 4-3. Well, did those practices reap any rewards? You're damn right they did, because all Arizona did after that was win the next 2 games in St. Louis. They were supposed to play Minnesota. The game got canceled. They had to play St. Louis again. Arizona got those practices in, lost the first one 4-3, then beat the Blues 3 straight times in St. Louis. Arizona did that. So the practices, being able to get a practice in and work on something means something.
No, it absolutely does. And maybe that's an angle that we can follow up with here as we go throughout the NHL season. But let's head to Pebble Beach, where the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am without amateurs is supposed to be played here this weekend. And this is not a great field now. Dustin Johnson withdrew from the field yesterday. There were some other players kind of in that mid-range that had withdrawn. So over at ATS.io, I put this up last night before DJ withdrew from the event. I don't like to edit things once they go up because people have already seen them. So both my preview over at ATS.io as well as over at bangthebook.com have Dustin Johnson in there. He is not in the tournament. He was like a 4-1 favorite. So obviously the odds have adjusted for everybody else in the field. So keep that in mind. Unfortunate that he backed out, but sort of is what it is. That took Patrick Cantlay down from 10-1 to 7-1. He's your favorite now with Daniel Berger at 12-1, Paul Casey 16-1, Jason Day, who's played very well here but just can't get a win, 18-1, along with Will Zalatoris, taking these numbers from BetMGM Sportsbook. Zalatoris, a guy that, I mentioned, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, might as well play him while he's still 50-1 because he's not going to be for long. Now he's priced in that 20-1 range here this week, albeit a lesser field. Spieth played well last week. He's 20-1. I got to start with this, though, Brian. No celebrity pairings here. So this is just a golf tournament now. They're not playing on Monterey Peninsula, only Spyglass Hill and Pebble Beach this week, cut after 36 holes instead of 54. A lot of changes here for this one this year, but now it's just a golf tournament instead of all the fanfare and the usual hoopla that it has.
Yes, and I mean, I think you could even look at Phil Mickelson at 40-1 with Dustin Johnson out of there. He knows how to play this course as good as anybody. He's won an Army at times down there. So I think, a guy like Mickelson, and he's been putting some low rounds together. I think can he do it for 4 days is the question. But you could look at a guy like Mickelson. But the fact that you're saying they're playing 2 courses, not 3, which means 2 times an extra round at Pebble. Anybody that doesn't necessarily play well at Pebble that could be problematic for them. An extra round at Pebble is a good thing for a guy like Mickelson, where, you don't have to go out and, shoot 63, 64 for, just to keep pace on the other courses. I would look at a guy like, I think you got to go bomb hunting this week with this field. The kid like Doug Gim, 75-1, he's got game. Somebody could step up to the plate. I would say this to you, and this is probably unfair. And I do throw this guy's name out a lot, but he's a bulldog and he's a fighter, but not dealing with the people and just focusing on the golf tournament thing and not all the nonsense that goes with it, with the Pro-Am. A guy like Rory Sabatini just, goes out and focuses, and he doesn't have to go glad-handing around and be a nice guy, out there, with a scorn on his face trying to win a golf tournament at 75-1. A lot of this is going to be between years because they don't have to worry about, a lot of these guys show up there. They all got a boatload of money. They go there to have fun. And, oh, by the way, maybe I can win a golf tournament. This is a golf tournament.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you said, I think it does kind of help that you don't get to go to Monterey Peninsula and put up a super low score, just, conquer that course, which is the weakest of the three. So that does sort of bring a lot of different guys into play here, because this really isn't a course, Pebble Beach, for being a bomber. We've had some really interesting winners here in this tournament in the past. Guys like Vaughn Taylor have won it. Ted Potter Jr. has won this event. Nick Taylor won it last year. We've seen a lot of different guys go out and win this thing, and they're not necessarily all bombers. And Pebble Beach is a precision course. It's a course for guys that play well in the wind. Gary Woodland is a good wind player. He won the U.S. Open in 2019. He's not playing this week, but it takes a different kind of player where you're playing 54 of the 72 holes now on this Pebble Beach Golf Links track. So that's something that's a pretty interesting wrinkle here, where Spyglass is one where you could be a bomber, hang a 62, come back to Pebble, and, have given yourself a little bit of margin for error. So, again, like everything else, things, a little bit different here this time around. As far as the short prices go, I know he's coming back from the European Tour and from the Saudi International. I do like Paul Casey at 16-1. Again, a short price, probably find a better number on him Friday night. But that's a guy that's playing in great form right now. 3 top 12 finishes in his last 3 events. He was runner-up here 2 years ago. He plays very well. Another guy that I like, saw 80-1 before DJ withdrew from the event. Now he's in the 65 to 70-1 range. Peter Malnati, I think, is a good fit for this course. Plays really well with the irons and wedges. He's also putting extremely well this year. And the greens at Pebble can be kind of tough to putt on. So I think Peter Malnati in that 65, 70-1 range is a guy that I really like this week.
Yeah, and I'm scouring back, looking, and I'm going from memory. And he's always a guy you think of on the West Coast. And his current form's kind of hot garbage. But man, why is it? I know it's West Coast for sure, but am I not wrong? Like a guy like Pat Perez at 150-1, isn't this his where he used to contend in this tournament all the time?
Yeah, he used to play well here for sure. You got another guy whose form is just awful, but he plays well in California is Brandt Snedeker at 80-1. He's won this tournament twice. He's not playing well by any means, but it sort of brings up that question, and it's a question that a lot of people have. Do you pay attention to course form, or do you pay attention to recent form? And sort of what matters more? And to me, I kind of use a hybrid of both. I kind of look at guys that know the course, know the layout, play well there, but I'm also looking for guys that are playing well overall, which is how I sell on a guy like Peter Malnati. But it's hard to argue with the fact that Jason Day's missed back-to-back cuts, but he's got 8 top 10 finishes here. It's a tough thing to kind of figure out of, maybe a guy just gets to a course where he feels comfortable and everything clicks for him.
Well, it's like anything. A guy's current form, and it matters. Don't get me wrong. But golf, that's why golf is so much fun to bet, because other than like a Dustin Johnson or, Justin Thomas or these guys that are, even when they're not playing well, they seem to be on the first page of the leaderboard. All of a sudden, boom, here a guy shows up. The thing about golf is, even at this level, a realistic, I think, 3 to 5 weeks, when something clicks, guys go on a Tootsie Roll for 3 to 5 weeks. There's a current form window guy finishes fifth, then he wins the next week, and then 6-7 weeks later they're back and miss a cut, but they find something clicks on Friday, and they take it into the weekend. They figured something out, and then they carry it to the next tournament. So that's why the bomb can go off in a golf tournament.
Two things. One, I think the biggest surprise this weekend is that Sung J M is actually not playing this event, because that kid plays every event possible. And two, I am shocked that you didn't call or text me on Sunday and tell me that you had bet Brooks Koepka Friday night, or going into the final round, because I totally figured you were going to do that.
You know what? I had so much going on. I didn't get involved this past week. I really didn't. But that was something pretty cool. Well, what was Koepka going into the weekend?
No, I don't know. I figured you would call me and be like, "Yeah, I played Koepka at 30-1 or something like that."
Well,
and I would have you on the phone.
But honestly, that is the way to do it. Is that you sit there and you identify a guy like Koepka, who's maybe, and his form hadn't been that good, but for argument's sake, a guy like Koepka who's 16-1 to start the tournament, but he's 5 shots back on Friday, and you get him at 25-1. That's where you get the overlaid value price. Like Cantley is 7-1. Okay, I wouldn't go near him with a 10-foot pole, but if Cantley's 5 shots back on Friday night, he's going to be 16-20-1. That's when you bet Cantley.
Well, and one other thing here too, and I think this will be a really great angle for third round matchups on Saturday. You're probably going to find guys that go out and shoot a 74, 75, something like that on Thursday at Pebble Beach. They shoot 66 or 65 on Spyglass Hill on Friday, make the cut, but then they got to go back to Pebble on Saturday and Sunday, where you could probably fade those guys in matchups and make some good money out of it. So that'll be a good angle for this tournament too, I think.
All right, here it is. Watch this. I don't know how long has it been, and it's almost getting comical. It's like watching, what's his name, Finau. He's right there. He comes all the way back. He gets tied for the lead over in Dubai. Dustin Johnson couldn't make a putt to save his life, and then Finau's all the way there. He's there, right there to win it again. He hits it in the water, or he misses a short putt. He does the same stuff over and over. I'm wondering, the price is right. If you'd have gone back, say 2 years ago, with this field, Ricky Fowler would be sitting there at 15-1.
Yep.
Ricky Fowler's at 40-1 in a diminished field. Is this the day maybe that he get let's put all the commercials behind us and hoist the trophy?
Oh man, he looks so bad though. I cannot remember a player that's that high profile just falling apart the way that he has. I don't know if it's the no major thing that's been kind of hanging around his neck forever or what it is, but I cannot remember a guy that was on the cusp so many times and even won, some lesser tournaments or won the Players, kind of the quote unquote fifth major, but just the dude I couldn't put money on him for anything now.
Yeah, it's odd. It's an odd dynamic. I mean, you got all the talent in the world. This is going to be an interesting tournament that you get to Friday night, unless somebody, goes bonkers. But the nature of the beast, I'm telling you, the tournament this past week, the mind is a funny thing. What's his name? James Hahn. James Hahn comes out, early on, he's posted a number on a course where you can light it up at the tail end. You can go nuts. And he goes nuts on the front nine, the hard part of the course. And everybody, all the leaders, everybody above him imploded. And the minute the guy looked up at the leaderboard and had a 3-shot lead and got to the easy part of the course, he couldn't hit a fairway. He's hitting it in the water. He vomited all over his foot joist.
It was bad. I watched it.
He had it won. I mean, that tournament was a 3-shot lead going to the back nine, and the way he was playing, and he went to the easier part of the course, he just unraveled like a ball of string. It was kind of sad actually to watch.
Oh, he was talking to himself the whole time. I mean, it was bad. He was obviously just losing it. And then Koepka, bounces in the eagle on 17. And it's like, all right, well, that's the end of the tournament. So, fun times, but, obviously some good betting opportunities here for this weekend at Pebble Beach. And Brian, will finish up with NASCAR here. NASCAR actually starts tonight with the Busch Clash on the road course at Daytona International Speedway. They will run a points race on the road course next weekend, but this weekend is the Daytona 500. And a few real quick things off the top here before we sort of break down the 500, that Kyle Larson is back. He's running for Hendrick Motorsports. He'll be in the number 5 car, which used to be the number 88 of Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman moves into Jimmy Johnson's old number 48 car as Jimmy Johnson retires from the sport. Clint Boyer also retired, and I think it's Chase Briscoe that will be in Clint Boyer's 14 car to start the year here. There are some crew chief changes, some driver changes, stuff like that. Talked about those in an article over at bangthebook.com for you to check out. But Brian, as far as the Daytona 500 goes, Denny Hamlin's won 3 of the last 5 here, but I was looking at his last 10 races at Daytona overall. 3 of the last 5 wins in the 500, but overall in his last 10 races, average finish of 13.1, which just speaks to the chaos and the carnage that you get at Daytona.
Well, it's restrictor plate racing. It's a different animal. The one thing that Hamlin does, and there are guys that do this, it's survival, and it's be there in the last 10 laps. And Hamlin's usually in the photo, and I will guarantee you why those numbers are 13. I'll guarantee you that in 2 or 3 of those races, he was running in the top 5 and was right there with a chance to win it. There was an accident, and he finished 20th, but he was right there every time. He's going for history. No one's ever won the thing 3 times in a row. So, obviously he's the starting point. But you mentioned the two guys. Well, the one guy, I think Larson will come back with a chip on his shoulder, and it's baked in the cake. The number's low. I thought he'd be a nice price play. The guy I think is also there, that's always there with a chance to win and does start the season fast, is Blaney, but that price isn't good enough for me. In the restrictor plate race, we've seen some goofy things. Who was the one kid? Trevor Bayne won the damn race, right? At a gazillion to 1.
Yep. Yeah, so, it's all over the place. It really is.
The other guy for Daytona, Logano's a 10 to 1. Logano's another one who A, knows how to get to the front, but B, is also a guy that knows how to get to the front and block. So, Logano certainly is a guy you got to look at. But I was thinking Larson and Blaney, but I'm not doing a cartwheel about 10 to 1. But even these numbers are no good, man. Bowman's 14 to 1. You look at some of these numbers, we're not getting real juicy stuff. Truex is 25 to 1. He's not a restrictor plate guy, but De Benedetto's interesting at 40 to 1. He's another one that's sneaky, always around at the finish in restrictor plate racing. So's Kurt Busch. He's 20 to 1.
Yeah, it's so challenging because, you've got the favorite in that 6 to 8 to 1 range. And of course it is Hamlin, and deservedly so. And, Chase Elliott's up there, Logano and Blaney, as you mentioned. I think Brad Keselowski in that, 14 to 1 or so range isn't a bad look. Keselowski only has 4 lead lap finishes in the last 10 races. One of them was a win. Another one was a top 10. So when he actually finishes the race, he does okay. But, it's hard to finish this race because you always get that big crash that takes out, 15 to 20 of the cars. And then you kind of just hope that your guy is still left standing at the end of this whole thing. One guy I think is interesting, a couple guys I think are interesting here. Eric Jones. You can find him out there in the 50 to 60 to 1 range, maybe even higher at some places. I'm a little bit concerned because he left Joe Gibbs Racing. So he's got a new team, new crew chief, new pit crew, all that kind of thing. He's running for Richard Petty Motorsports now. Leaving Joe Gibbs is definitely a downgrade, pretty much, across the board, unless you go to Penske where they've been really good, or Hendrick. So a downgrade for Eric Jones, but I do think he's a good racer. And now the pressure is kind of off a little bit being with a different team. The other one in that 50 to 1 range, and he was right there last year before arguably the scariest crash I've ever seen in a NASCAR race, Ryan Newman. Ryan Newman runs really well here. He finds a way, like you, he's kind of like you were talking about with Hamlin. he's kind of a survivor here. He just sort of, I don't know, has a sixth sense or a feel for, kind of getting out of the way, with the exception of, the tail end of last year, of course. But yeah, 50-1. I mean, like you said, you got to throw some shots around here because anything can happen in this race.
Well, the one thing that you should note is, at the 1.5-mile tracks, it's the guys with the best cars.
Right.
The car's just a rocket sled. In the restrictor plate racing, you can just get sucked along by somebody and be in a position to make that slingshot move at the right time, even if you have an inferior car and you get a push from a guy from behind you. That's why the restrictor plate races, I guess, produce some crazy results. I will tell you a guy that they raved about last year, and he's just as aggressive as the day is long, and he's pedal to the metal all the time. Maybe the car just wasn't, up to snuff on the 1.5 miles, but in the restrictor plate racing, I tell you now that we're yapping about, I'm going to take a shot with Tyler Reddick because he's a real aggressive kid. And again, with the restrictor plate racing, it's about being in position at the end. And memory serves, he's pretty good. He runs near the front. And you just got to be there with a shot with 3 laps to go and hope it doesn't end under yellow. Unless you guys in front, you want it to end under yellow. But I think of the price, guys, 50-1, I will absolutely have a play on Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, Reddick's won a couple of the plate races at the Xfinity Series level, so I don't think that's a bad look. And, certainly you get a better price in a different kind of race, but with everybody bunched up here because of that restrictor plate element, Reddick, I'm seeing 40-1. You said 50-1. Again, find some price plays here. But real quickly, the full season futures out for the NASCAR championship here. And it is worth noting that the finale is in Phoenix again. So Kevin Harvick, your plus 550 favorite. However, Brian, as you and I were talking before the show here, NASCAR's made a lot of adjustments to the schedule. They got the road course race at Daytona next weekend. They've got a dirt race at Bristol at Thunder Valley. They're coming up, I think, in week 7, something like that. They're running Road America July 4th. They're running a road race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a road race in Austin. They're doing a race at Nashville now, a track that they've never run at before. That's kind of an intermediate track. So when I look here at these championship futures, I want to shy away from a guy like Harvick at plus 550. Probably shy away from Keselowski at plus 800. Truex has gotten better on the shorter tracks here of late. He's kind of a 1.5 mile guy, though. Losing some of those 1.5 mile races. They're not running Kentucky this year. They're not running Chicagoland. They took away a points race from Texas. So not as many of those standard issue, cookie cutter 1.5 mile tracks. That's going to bring probably some different names into play when you talk about the futures market.
Well, and don't forget, from the playoffs, if you win, you're in the playoffs. So, the first order of business is to make sure you get in the playoffs. Then they start to whittle it down. From the futures perspective, and once you get in the playoffs, your price gets cut in half. I mean, I would look at, seriously, I would look at Blaney. He's 16-1 to win the championship. He was right there. He was such a bad luck guy last year, right there all the time. And it's just another year under his belt. It's like Chase Elliott, another year under his belt. And Blaney has a good car. There are many, many weeks where Blaney's got the best car, and for whatever reason, he gets shuffled back and he makes a big push and he falls just short. But, it's part of the learning curve. I would take a little shot with a guy like Ryan Blaney at 16-1 because a month from now, he'll be down to 10-1.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, especially if, you win one of these races early and then you're already in the playoffs, as you mentioned. And, I think, Chase Elliott to repeat makes some sense. He's only 7-1, but again, with a lot of these different style race formats, it helps a guy like him. It helps a guy like Hamlin. Maybe it helps a guy like a Kurt Busch to make his way into the playoffs, something like that, where he just, he's been around for so long. He's so experienced. He knows a lot of different ways to race. So keep that in mind here. The schedule is going to be much different.
Bad things can happen. I mean, last year, how many races was a 2-horse race? It was Hamlin and Harvick every week. Well, you got to the final race of the year. Harvick didn't make it to the Final Four.
Yeah.
He didn't get there. The one accident or, one bad break or a penalty on pit row. You got to whittle it down. You got to get to the Final Four. Bad things happen in car races. But you thought it was going to be the showdown, Hamlin and Harvick in Phoenix, and a track that Harvick owns, he didn't even make the final race.
Yeah, no, that's true. And 21 of the 34 wins last year from Harvick, Hamlin, and Elliott. So one of the many reasons why NASCAR kind of altered this schedule, tried to find some unique and different races, stuff like that, to add more parity to the sport. So if you are looking at some of the longer prices out there for the NASCAR Futures Board, I think it's a good year to do that with a lot of these new races and new dates on the schedule. Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Tell us about those two shows, man.
All right, buddy, you're going to be on with me today, 2 o'clock Eastern time on the Sports Grid Radio Network and Sirius Channel 204. We do 2 hours now of Sportsbook Radio, 2 to 4 Eastern. We're on locally in Vegas, KSHP.com. We have Vegas Hockey Hotline, 1 o'clock Pacific time on KSHP.com. If you're a hockey fan, I think you'll like that. Dave Shane, beat writer for the Golden Knights, is our guest today from the Review Journal. He's a great guest. And, a lot of Golden Knights talk, but a lot about what's going on all around the NHL. And we do videos for you and all the good things. I mentioned the hockeybettingpodcast.ca, and you can check that out as Cam Stewart and I go through all the hockey and the betting angles you and I were just talking about. So we're kind of all over the map and looking forward to having you on the show today.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Once again, jack of all trades, Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline on the SiriusXM 204 network with Sports Grid. Brian, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you again next week.
By the way, I didn't mean to do that. And our buddy Stevie Slapshot, who's on virtually all the shows, does a great job. He's with us every day, too. Didn't mean to forget our man Stevie.
No, don't forget about Stevie. Stevie's thoughts at the end of every
Stevie, lug the mail, Stevie.
All right, there you go, Brian. Always appreciate your time, man. Thanks.
All right, buddy. Have a good day.
There you go. There's Brian Blessing, again, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline, SiriusXM 204. And then, of course, you can find his videos over on our ATS YouTube page as well. Coming up on Wednesday, we'll recap the Super Bowl and chat college basketball with Kiev O'Neill from the Odds Breakers. Thursday, Brad Powers will join me. And then Friday, to be determined here on ATS Radio. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.